I'm standing at the corner of the corner surf shop in Muizenberg, Cape Town's oldest surf shop and possibly the whole of Africa. I'm about to meet the owner, Peter Wright, local surfing pioneer. Hello Peter.
Oh Nick, how are you?
Well, thank you, and thanks for speaking with us.
Pleasure. We're going to have the interview, are we?
We're going to have a little chat.
Chat.
You can tell us about all your years here in Muizenberg.
All the years. 1971 is when I started out here, which is a long time ago now, about 42 years. And there weren't any surf shops in Cape Town. There had been surf shops in Cape Town, but they weren't at the particular time that I opened up. All the others had closed down and given up. And I thought it was a good idea. And Muizenberg was the nursery of surfing. That's where most people that surf in Cape Town learn to surf. Once they've learned here at Muizenberg, then they move on to the Atlantic side, which is a little bit more hectic to ride. Waves break a whole lot harder on that side than they do at Muizenberg. Muizenberg, we have a gentle shelf, and so going out to sea, and so the waves are kinder and easily able to be ridden. And this is the nursery of surfing in Cape Town.
Okay, so 1971. Surfing had a connotation of perhaps a slight rebelliousness, sort of slightly anti-conformist. Do you think that's still true today?
No, I really don't think so. But back in those days, when I opened my shop, surfing was actually banned between 6 o'clock in the morning and 6 in the evening. How about that, opening up a business in which you can't go surfing during the day?
Why was that?
Well, the local ratepayers chair lady and some of her colleagues decided that surfers were a bad element. You know, they smoked dope and they did all sorts of things, and it was not to be encouraged. Not to mention they might knock over a bather. So they managed to get the city council to put up signs and actually try and police it. It didn't last very long. It lasted about 3 years. And fortunately, it was taken away and we've never looked back.
But I remember seeing old photographs of George Bernard Shaw in the 1930s here in Muizenberg on a very, very primitive board.
Yes, I know the picture you're talking about. Those kind of surfboards you lay down on and were never really opposed by the council or anybody because you can control them a whole lot easier. And that you usually didn't go much deeper than your belly button to try and catch a wave unless you were a very good swimmer. So that was done in the shallows and it was never a problem. But yes, the very first surfing did take place in Muizenberg, the first in South Africa in 1918. We now have concrete proof of that. 3 American servicemen visited Muizenberg, and they somehow were friendly with a lady who they took surfing, and we have photographs of her down the beach standing up on a surfboard and them standing up on surfboards. And so those chaps up in Durban and elsewhere in the country, if they think they're the first, we're the first.
That's a great story. But just going back to my original question, it did have that slightly edgy anti-conformist feeling. You're saying now it's completely changed?
Surfers have always been seen as non-conformist because it's a sport which involves you and one-on-one with other people if there's a competition. And so it's a sport that individuals kind of go for. But it is the sport that spawns fashion. Surfing has, yes, as we were talking about, surfing has spawned fashion and speak. A lot of terms we use in English everyday language now are surf terms. And so surfing has been seen as an individual sport, but there are a lot of rugby players nowadays that come surfing, so they acknowledge that being a surfer is not something that's dead easy to happen. And surfers today are athletes, and they're usually people that don't smoke or drink or do things other than a couple of beers, of course, do things
which you guys used
detrimental to their bodies.
Which you used to do all those years ago, Peter.
No, I would never have done anything like that, Nick. You know, I'm a clean living kid that I am.
But basically, essentially what you're telling me is that surfing is now mainstream, whereas before it was a a marginal or at the edge sport.
Yes. In fact, the country that you come from, the UK, it's become so mainstream that if you went down to Newquay on holiday, one of the things you're bound to do is hire yourself a surfboard and go surfing. Surfing is they probably have more surf shops in the UK than we do in South Africa. So you get them in France, you get them in all sorts of countries nowadays, and so yes, surfing is seriously mainstream.
That's interesting. And what are the other big changes since you've been here in 1971, which you've witnessed?
Oh, well, Muizenberg on the up, because slowly it deteriorated, and then we got a lot of homeless people move into Muizenberg, usually from other parts of Africa, where they were, in some cases, probably scared to move into traditional black areas like Khayelitsha, for fear of upsetting the locals. They moved into Muizenberg, probably thought that it was a safer place. However, it tended to bring the place down, and we went through a bad period. That's all changed now. We have a new kind of yuppie, up-and-coming surfer that's moved into the town, and there are a lot of positive things on the go. We have well, I could go off on a tangent now of all the different things that we planned for Muizenberg, but Muizenberg's seriously on the up.
Yeah, but just going back into the history, a lot of your contemporaries who were surfing when you did and who were around when you started the shop, they became quite legendary in their own right.
Yes. You mean the old top surfers like the Sean Thompsons and the local ones like the Parmans?
That's right.
And many others. Yes, they themselves have moved on in life and excelled. We have, as you know, Sean Thompson has done extremely well. We have a string. I don't know if you'd like me to run through some of them, but there's an awful lot of South Africans that have excelled overseas. Not to mention to mention one, Kaz Collier, a Cape Townian, who went across to, I think it was Mexico, took part in a big wave surf contest and proceeded to win it. So, Cape Town has turned out its fair share of surfers. We have some of the best here, and it's not unusual for Western Province to beat Natal and the other provinces when we have competitions.
Which is pretty amazing, considering how much colder the water here is compared to the KZN coast.
Yes. But we have good wetsuits nowadays. The wetsuits have improved tremendously over the years, and it's not as bad as it used to be. We used to try and use that to an advantage, because imagine somebody from Natal used to warm water having to come and surf a competition in Cape Town. But a lot of those guys excelled. Sean Thompson, one of them, did extremely well when he was in Cape Town.
Do you see much obviously there's been huge differences and improvements in technology in surfing equipment and surfboards and wetsuits and so on. Do you see that constantly improving, or do you think we've reached a sort of peak or what a person can do on a board?
No, I really don't think we've reached the peak. One thinks that. In my lifetime, I've come to that conclusion many times, and only to see them press forward with some new idea. If you watch a top surfer today, Kelly Slater, the world champ, for example, is unbelievable what he can do on a wave. And if they can't ride the face of the wave, they ride the back of the wave. Floaters have become a surfing maneuver. And no, I think it'll press ahead. Technology in surfboards is improving all the time. Not at a great speed, but it's certainly improving. The motor cars are getting better. You might think old ones are better than the new ones, but then you try out a new one and you say, yeah, it is a lot easier. Look at the camera you're using right now. Instead of making a movie with a big camera, you're using a tiny little handheld job.
And very quickly, the best surfing spots in South Africa?
Jeffreys Bay, first of all, Eland's Bay, then, of course, Muizenberg. We're in Muizenberg, so you've got to come here to see us.
On that note, Peter, thank you very much for your time, and thank you for speaking with Uyaphi.com.
Right, cheers. Cheers, Nick.